And we are live 1 minute late, which is very unlike us.
Very unlike us, yes.
But our guest is having some technical difficulties and timing difficulties. So we are going to just get started yakking.
Happy Tuesday, folks. Welcome aboard.
Welcome aboard, and see, make sure Martin in the gallery there can see us and hear us.
Mm-hmm.
I don't see you
I
on
bet
yet.
he wishes he couldn't.
Okay, I don't see you on yet, but there we go. Absolutely. Yeah. Jolly good. So happy Tuesday.
Happy Tuesday.
And there is our wonderful esteemed guest coming through now.
Hello.
But I was just about to do his introduction, which I shall do without further ado, now that we know that the gods of technology have connected us. Today, we're super excited to be joined by Vivek J. Tiwary, who is an acclaimed producer of musical entertainment from Tony Award-winning Broadway shows, including Alanis Morissette's Jagged Little Pill and Green Day's American Idiot, to groundbreaking immersive experience. He is a Grammy Award-winning record producer as well, a New York Times #1 best-selling author of The Fifth Beatle, which we'll talk about today, about our old buddy Brian Epstein, and a media financier and investor. He's also the founder of Tiwary Entertainment Group, TEG, TEG+, and they are shifting the paradigm for music in entertainment as the only production company that focuses on collaborating with the music industry and celebrity artists to create a narrative and deeply experiential entertainment.
What a busy boy.
Combined, these productions have won 25 Tony Awards and 59 Tony nominations. So without further ado, I would welcome to the stage Vivek. Hey, how are you?
Good morning.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm so sorry. I'm a few minutes late.
That's okay.
That's quite all right.
Things happen.
I'm so
Fashionably late.
I'm so pleased to be with you.
Yeah, we are delighted to have you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for making the time, because I can just tell from the first paragraph of your bio what a busy man you are.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Ivor Davis is going to tune in today. He sends us messages. Yeah, I'm in touch with Ivor.
Hey there, Ivor, wherever you are.
Yeah, and Debbie Martin, who is one of my regulars.
I love Debbie.
Yeah, she sends her love.
She says, hi, my friend.
Yeah.
Well, that's wonderful.
Oh, lovely. You know, yeah. I mean, they're really, I mean, it's as good a place as any to start. It really is quite wonderful what a community there is.
Isn't it just?
Yeah, that's right.
You know, these people are like family, you know.
Yeah.
You took the words out of my mouth.
Well, I have hesitated to invite you for a long time because I thought, oh no, he'll never do it. He's too big time. And then I thought, oh, what the hell? He can only say no.
No! Oh my gosh! I'm so happy to be. I'm only terribly embarrassed. I was late.
That's quite right.
I'm totally happy to be here.
I will back your little legs for you afterwards.
I will tell you, this is the best part of my day. I'd much rather be doing this than talking to investors and dealing with all that sort of stuff. So I'm thrilled to be here. Thank you.
Really good.
So I, of course, in preparing for this, once again, I had seen it before, but watched your wonderful TED Talk. And I think I would have loved to have seen a shot on the audience with your opening line. A gay Jew walks into a club.
Isn't that what happened, though? I mean, I wasn't there, unfortunately, but you know, from what I was told, you know, people like Debbie, you know, like it's you know, he was a gay Jew, 26-year-old kid walked into a basement, really, not really a bar, and the whole world changed, you know.
Absolutely, yeah.
Well, and the happenstance that, you know, his family owned a music store, of course, that didn't hurt, because then he could sell their records. And there's some wonderful old footage that floats around of the NEMS Brian's store, which stood for North End Music Store. Do you remember that? You're too young, but you've probably seen it in film, those little listening booths they had with the pegboard Julia Child wall on the back. And there's a great little shot in the listening booth grooving along of a 17-year-old Frida Kelly.
Amazing.
I know. Who knew?
And we're all still friends. Like you said, it's family. We're all still here.
Yeah, I was in touch with Frida yesterday, actually.
Yeah.
Oh, so, how lovely.
What led you, from all your other Broadway and Tony live musical experiences, what fascinated you about Brian Epstein and choosing him to be your fifth Beatle in your wonderful graphic novel?
So, you know, my sort of passion, that's really the only word for it, for Brian and learning more about him and his life story, you know, really goes back, you know, all the way to my college days. You know, long before I was professional and was producing musicals or writing graphic novels. it really just stemmed from a place of interest.
Yeah.
And I found myself in college at business school, at the Wharton School of Business in Philadelphia, here in the U.S. And Wharton in the early 90s, I'll date myself, and so that was when I was in college. They didn't have resources for young people like me who were interested in the business of the arts. They do now, but back then it was really all about accounting and finance, and the internet boom hadn't even happened, so they weren't even looking at new media. It was very traditional business fields. So I was dreaming about a life in the entertainment industry and working with music. I always say music was my first love.
Yeah.
I'll just quickly say on a side note, I was born here in New York. My parents were immigrants, but my family was originally from India.
Right.
And my parents didn't work in the arts, but they loved the arts.
Right.
And ever since I was a little kid, my parents were taking me to see Broadway shows and opera and ballet.
Great.
Ever since I was allowed out of the house on my own, I was going downtown to see early punk rock shows and experimental theater and seeing the avant-garde arts.
Great.
I just grew up with this beautifully well-rounded love of the arts, with music as my first love.
Right.
So that was always my dream, was to somehow work in music.
Right.
And, so not getting the studies that I wanted in my school, and being very nerdy and academic, I thought I have to study this stuff on my own. So being a lifelong Beatles fan, I always say I was listening to the Beatles before I was born, because my parents loved the Beatles and they were playing them when my mom was pregnant. I always thought that the little I knew, I felt that the Beatles and their management team kind of wrote the rules for the modern music industry.
Right.
So I thought, I should study the life of Brian Epstein, the guy that discovered and managed the band. But, I knew very little about him.
Right.
And, this began an intense period of research. Because again, the early 90s, there's no Wikipedia, there's no YouTube, there's no Google, there are none of these online resources you take for granted.
Yeah.
Right.
And so I didn't have a choice but to meet some of these people that are now family, people who spent time with him, who actually knew him, who could talk to me about him. Because also there are no books about Brian. There's Ray Coleman's The Man Who Made the Beatles is lovely, and you can find it quite easily now on used book websites. But there were no used book websites in this research, so I just had to talk to people who knew him.
Well, you had to know a guy who had Bill Harry's phone number, or Tony Barrow's phone.
Tony Barrow,
right?
Living in New York, I was in New York at the time. Two of my very earliest meetings were with Nat Weiss and Sid Bernstein.
Oh, wow.
Unfortunately, both who passed away, but they were right here in my backyard, and they absolutely were they were so open.
Yeah.
I ended up having a Passover Seder with the Bernstein family. I mean, it was really
very cool.
They embraced me like family. They really did.
I also think that there's a certain amount of the universe guiding the Beatles, and when Sid and Brian and everybody met, I mean, the deal for the February 9th appearance on the Ed Sullivan Show was done on 11/11/63. And if you're a believer in 11/11 and convergence like I am, I think that's no mistake. And then, of course, a couple of weeks later, JFK was assassinated. And I think America just needed to breathe again. Everybody been holding their breath. It was the worst Thanksgiving and Christmas America had in a very, very long time, probably since Pearl Harbor, and I think they just came along at the right time. And Brian was I remember him as being very, very gentle. He's the embodiment to me of speak softly but carry a big stick. He was always going to get what he wanted, but he did it in such a way. It was like a Vulcan mind melt where he made you think that you thought of the deal points.
Yeah. Now here's the epitome of the word gentleman.
Yes.
Gentleman.
Absolute class.
True gentleman from a great family upbringing.
And I'm sure that's what you heard from the likes of Sid Bernstein and the rest, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was it really, I mean, the irony here is I started this research because I was a business student, and and I wanted to know the business of the Beatles. I wanted to know, how did he get them a record deal when everyone passed on them? How did he convince Ed Sullivan to book the Beatles? How did he come up with the idea for the suits and design their image? Those were the stories I wanted. Yeah. But by these folks welcoming me like family, and they told me those stories, but eventually they really began to trust me, and they started telling me about his personal life and the fact that he was gay at a time when it was against the law.
Oh yeah.
Matt Weiss told me a lot about that, and Sid Bernstein about what it was like to be Jewish in the music industry in the 1960s when Jewish folks didn't rule the industry and they were really hustling to get ahead. Yeah. And Brian was also young. He was 26 when he discovered the Beatles. Right. And from Liverpool, Liverpool prior to the Beatles is not a city that people are looking at for the next big music sensation. I mean, it had an amazing music scene, but people weren't looking at it from the rest of the world.
Like kind of like Pittsburgh, very industrial, very post-war. I always say the Beatles grew up in black and white and finished their career in psychedelic color.
I love that you said that, because that's literally was my thesis for the graphic novel. When I made the Fifth Beatle, when people say, why did you choose graphic novel? And I was like, because it's the medium that I believe most effectively uses color. And if you look at the book, the first few pages are it's black, white, and gray and blue. So we added blue to that. And then we slowly add more color. And at the end of the book, we're in full color, because you're absolutely right. That's exactly what happened. Yeah, that literally was my poetic thesis behind why I made the Fifth Beatle as a comic book.
Yeah, I mean, my dad Jim McCartney was a very old-fashioned conservative. He liked white linen and white napkins and white towels because you could, you couldn't see the germ. If you have pink sheets and blue towels, you couldn't see the germs. And so he was very old-fashioned and conservative. But he obviously knew that Brian was gay and didn't care, welcomed him in with open arms. So the bond between Brian and Jim, that I think he never had to come out because, obviously the boys told him, we think he's a bit light in the loafers. And my dad just didn't care. And so for somebody like Brian, who would have been terrified at home in those days of coming out to his family, I think, he really just respected my dad for he never brought it up. He never asked. He just didn't care.
Didn't matter. No.
But,
nor should it.
Nor should it matter. But we've come a long way, and it's Pride Month, which is fabulous. But I think how happy Brian must be up there now that we're getting more towards acceptance and equality. Yeah. We've still got a ways to go, but
this was really the heart of I mean, it's coming back to your original question of like, what was it about Brian? For me, I'm a first generation American. As I mentioned earlier, my family were immigrants originally from India. Yeah. When I was running around the Lower East Side in New York, people, who believed in me thought that I would be a doctor or an engineer. That's what young people of Indian origin were supposed to do. Yeah. And everybody else thought that I would drive a taxi cab or work in a deli. Those were the extreme. Those were the career options. Yeah. Working in entertainment was like, that was crazy. That was, that wasn't in the cards for someone like me.
Yeah, right.
When I learned Brian's story, and I thought, my gosh, if this gay Jewish kid from Liverpool bring the world the Beatles, why couldn't a weirdo Indian kid like me work in entertainment and write graphic novels and produce Broadway musicals,
Right.
The Brian Epstein story filled me with so much hope and possibility.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
And there's now a statue to the lovely man in our hometown.
Yeah. Did you have anything to do with that statue?
I helped them. I mean, I helped with the effort to raise money for it, and I can't really claim any credit, for it. So the real answer is no, not much. But I was a champion of it, and I donated, and I helped raise some awareness. So I like to think I had a tiny part. So
just saw a lovely picture this morning of Billy J. Kramer. He's just got a new record out, and he's been over in Liverpool shooting video, and there's a picture of him beside the statue of Brian, which is really nice.
Right.
Billy's lovely. He wrote the introduction for he's another person that was very open with his stories, and he wrote the introduction for the Fifth Beatle.
Yeah, we're so glad that he's found a nice lady after he lost his wife. That was just tragic. But
he was so out of the blue. It was so sad.
No, it really wasn't. May Pang let me know, and we sort of all rallied around and tried to do the little bits we could to help. But he is a true Scouser. He's come back out of that corner fighting, and he's just turned 80, and he's got this great new music out. Yeah. And again, Brian would be so proud that one of his stable is still swinging for the fences. It's great.
Oh, and Billy continues to sing about Brian, and
I love Billy.
References to him, and it's just. Yeah, it's really special.
So to the other part of your world, how on earth do you get a toehold in Broadway? Where did you start?
Oh my gosh, it's a really good question. It was really just it's probably not unlike how Brian got the Beatles noticed. It was like just force of nature and will, just not taking no for an answer and fighting my way into the industry, really. But I mentioned I grew up in New York, so I grew up with my parents loving the arts, and they took me to shows since I was a little kid. So I fell in love with it. So I knew that I wanted to be in the industry. I worked for record labels before I started my company, but as soon as I started my own company, I knew that Broadway was a world that I wanted to work in. Mm-hmm. And I just met some of the people who were the lead producers on The Producers, the Mel Brooks musical.
Wow.
And I basically begged them to give me a small seat at the table. I did raise some money for the show, so I did earn part of my way, but I really didn't. I was really very fortunate that these lead producers liked me and saw me as a potential future producer in the space. And they taught me, they let me attend some meetings that I probably shouldn't have been at, and I was just sitting in the back corner listening. They let me come into their offices after hours and read documents and contracts and learn how these things were put together. And that's what I said. I said, listen, I'm happy to raise a little money for the show, but really I want to learn. I'm here because I want to learn how it's done.
Yeah, and you sure did.
Oh boy, did you?
Boy, did you ever.
49 Tony nominations later.
Thank you. And it was a great show to learn from. I also, that part was very fortunate. The producers did very, very well.
Oh, it's wonderful.
So I was able to learn a lot from that show. And that was kind of my in. And then after that, I just, once I got my foot in the door, I was just kept pushing, I joined the team behind Hairspray, and then A Raisin in the Sun, and just kind of worked my way up to The Addams Family, and then American Idiot, working with Green Day. And then most recently, I was the lead producer with my friends Eva Price and Arvin David on Jagged Little Pill, and that was a really wonderful moment.
Wow,
I bet.
It's been a good ride. It's been really lovely. Yeah,
it's amazing. Did you ever get to see Moving Out on Broadway?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
So our friend Michael Cavanaugh is the lead.
Kind
of player singer guy. He's incredible. We've been trying to get him on here, but he travels. He does so many corporate gigs, and he's just played just sold out the Cerritos pack with the Pacific Symphony. They did the music of Elton John that night. So it's a small world, isn't it, when you know people of the sort of the same ilk. But there's a funny, the producers has a funny history in our family, because obviously it's not very funny if you're a German living in Munich of a certain age, right? It might not be your cup of tea. And so I was living in Munich, signed to BMG as an artist. I call them big mean Germans because of the way the contract was written. And so I went to a funeral and met what is now my 32 years later, still my husband. And I thought, well, I like this guy, but how do I sort of audition him to see if he's going to get me and get us? Because you buy one, you get one free. And so I invited him around to the house to the flat for a date. And my mom was working at the American Army base in Munich, and she was able to procure a VHS copy of The Producers. So we had dinner and a movie. And
that was the movie.
5 minutes in.
Yeah.
5 minutes in, he's laughing his ass off, and I'm like, yeah, he's the right German. He'll do. I can marry him.
Amazing. That's a great story.
Because most Germans don't find it very funny.
I'm sure they don't.
Go figure.
That's Mel Brooks for you,
Oh God, what a wonderful man.
On the Fox lot years ago, our friend Kim Cooper, who's a big exec producer for James Cameron stuff, she invited me to lunch on the Fox lot, and traffic was great. I was super early, and I was seated at one end of the dining room, and the first person to come in at like 11:35 was Mel Brooks, and he sat down the other end of the dining room, and he nodded and I nodded, and he raised his water glass and I raised mine. And after a while, nobody was coming in yet, and so he put his napkin over his arm like a waiter, and he marched down the dining room to my table, and I thought, he's not going to take my order. This isn't some kind of setup. Is there a hidden camera somewhere, And he flirted his napkin and put it down, and he said, "Shall we tango?" And I said, "But of course." So he sang the tango from one end of the dining room with me to the other end, twirled me around, put me in my chair, took his napkin, went back to his table and never said another word.
Amazing.
What a man. What a guy.
It's amazing. I've never had an experience quite like that with him, but I believe you. I mean, he really was everything. You know, he was very often. You know, I've met folks who are not what you want them to be. You know, the celebrities. But Mel was everything you would want him to be.
Oh yes, wonderful. Yeah.
Absolutely. Now, do you know, is the story true that I have heard that he went around Hollywood with the original script of the producers, and everybody said, "Oh, this will never fly. It's absolutely disgusting. We're not going to finance it." So he went away and spent what little money he had, and got an outline, not a full script, an outline written about what a bastard Hitler was and how terrible he was, and then he went around Hollywood and raised the money, but he still went away and made the producers.
I've heard this story as well, and who knows, you know?
You never know, do you, with him? Yeah.
Oh, what a piece of work!
Definitely the legend, and you know, sometimes the legends are as good, or better than the truth. So I'll go with it. Yeah.
So how do you choose, like, American Idiot, obviously, you know, and Jagged Little Pill, huge hits, but how does that sort of happenstance come whereby you say all of the elements are here to make a Broadway show?
Yeah, I mean, it's there isn't really an easy answer to that. It's really just I mean, for me, everything starts with the music, you know. So does this album or these set of songs or this composer, if you're talking about new music, you know, do they have a story in them? Do they have music that can be narrative, you know, that can play to the back of the room, that can be big and sonically carry, you know, be powerful in that sense, but also give you a sense of intimacy. You know, the thing that I always say about Jagged Little Pill, when I went and re-listened to it with theater ears, the songs felt big and bold, like they could play to the back of the room, but the lyrics were very small. The lyrics were like, this is what happened to me one summer. This is what happened when in a relationship I was involved in. It felt like you were right inside the head of the singer. You know, and that to me is almost the definition of a great musical theater song. It plays to the back of the room, but it makes you feel like you're just with that one person.
Well, and
that's kind of the first thing I look for with the music.
It's kind of that with the lyrics, it's probably that everyman shared experience, which is so prevalent in country music, right? The listener can hear his or herself in the story.
Yeah.
And identify with it.
It's interesting because, you know, with country, yeah, I mean, listen, you're absolutely right. But the other thing that I would say when you think about musical theater is, like, you also don't want to go too far into storytelling with lyrics. You know, it's wonderful if you're just listening to a song, and the song, like a lot of country music does, tells a story and narrates a story, you know. But if you're on stage, you kind of, it's that old, you know, that old thing that your English professor may have told you. It's like, you know, show don't tell. You know, like you want somebody to sing a song about how they're feeling, not tell you, and then I walked down the street and then I got in my car and then she told me this and then this happened at a dinner. Like, if you're going to turn that into a piece of musical theater, you want to see the person walking down the street and see them getting into the car and see them sitting down at dinner with their loved ones. You don't want to hold it in a song. So that's another very interesting thing you have to be careful about when evaluating is a song right for musical theater, you know.
That it's setting the emotional scene and not the physical scene, right?
Yes, or balancing the two. Because sometimes it's okay. You just don't want every song to be like that.
Right.
You know?
Wow, very interesting. So back to the Beatles, do you think there will ever be a consummate Beatles Broadway show? I mean, Beatle bands have played New York, obviously Carnegie Hall, but there's so much to choose from. It would be almost impossible to weave together just 2 hours of music, wouldn't it?
Yeah, listen, I mean, your question was, will there ever be? And, like, you know, I think the answer is probably yes. Because there's, you know, because the Beatles really are that timeless band, you know. I think that, you know, 200 years from now, people will still be listening to the Beatles. So, you know, at some point, someone will figure it out. You know, I think, you know, did we ever think we would hear, you know, that new Beatles track with, you know, that we could hear a old John Lennon demo?
Yes, that's true.
We never thought that was going to happen.
No. Well, we didn't know about AI or have any idea of it then.
No, and there is actually one more Beatles song by George that you can find on YouTube, and it was brought to my attention by a wonderful chef also from the Indian diaspora, actually Indian born. He is the executive chef at an incredible, if you ever get to Houston or you're going to Houston, let me know first, and I will hook you up with Musafir. It means traveler in Hindi. It is a 10,000 square foot, $3 million build out of an Indian palace in the courtyard, the mirror room and whatever. But Chef Mayank Istwal, who is a spice expert and genius, he took a 100-day journey around India to resurrect old recipes and spices that are disappearing off the planet. He was born in a town called Dehradun, which is near Rishikesh up in the north. And he said to me, well, surely you've heard the George Harrison song, Dehradun, Dehradun, Dehradun. And I'm like, no. He sent me the YouTube link. And if you Google Deradhun, I think it is, there is one more Beatles single out there that they haven't released, you see.
Matter of time.
And it's thanks to India. So you see. It's all connected in some wonderful, beautiful way. I really do believe that. Well, when John had learned, he was learning from God, name escapes me. Sorry, he was learning sitar from Ravi Shankar. When George was learning sitar from Ravi Shankar, obviously he was back and forth to India, which is what led to their trip. But he was one of the very first silent investors in an Indian restaurant in England, and we now know that Indian food is the national dish. Like in the food Olympic, the European Food Olympics last year, Great Britain sent chicken tikka masala as the national dish of Britain.
Amazing. Does that restaurant still exist?
I don't know. It was out near Brick Lane, and there's a ton of them now. Brick Lane is, Indo-Pac food central. It's pretty amazing stuff. But just the fashions and the influence that George's fascination with India had on pop culture.
That's right.
I think is still underestimated to this day, to be honest. Yeah. Meditation and the inclusion in the music and vegetarianism and all those things. So it's that's a conversation we'll have over a curry one night when this
is what makes them truly timeless, is because their impact is still being realized.
That's right.
That's absolutely right.
Later.
So what is the latest on the Tiwary and the Teg Plus group slate? What are you working on, if you can tell us?
Well, we're unfortunately doing a lot of stuff I can't quite talk about yet.
Okay.
But there's a few things that I can. We are making a stage musical based on the book Harold and the Purple Crayon, which is a beloved children's book in the US. It's not as well known in the UK. But we're turning that book into a stage musical. We're working with the band AJR. They're writing new music for it.
Great.
And I can tell you that we have found our director, but I can't tell you who it is because we haven't formally announced it yet. But we found a wonderful director, and so that project is very much off to the races. Cool. And we're very excited about that. We're designing that specifically for stage. So very excited about that. And we also have a stage musical based on the graphic novel A Contract with God. It's a graphic novel written by Will Eisner. And, many dorky comic nerds like myself will say that it's the greatest graphic novel of all time. It's a very beloved graphic novel within those circles. And I say that those nerdy circles, I say that fondly because I'm a part of those circles. But one thing people don't actually debate that much is that it's the first graphic novel. So it was the first time the phrase graphic novel was used to describe a novel length work of a story told entirely through comic book stylings and art. And it takes place in New York City in a fictional tenement house in the Bronx. And it's very much an immigrant story, a story about chasing dreams. It happens to be very much of a Jewish story, and I'm not Jewish, but those other elements, I grew up a child of immigrants here in New York City, so I could really relate to a lot of the themes in The Contract with God.
Wonderful.
And and being a comic book fan, obviously, is something so I'm just very passionate about this project. And as I said, it is very much a Jewish story as well. So what we've done is we've put together our composing group. We jokingly say internally that we've created a Jewish supergroup. It's Lisa Loeb, the singer-songwriter Lisa Loeb, Buell, Ryan Miller from the band Guster, Yahoo, and a gentleman named Sam Hollander.
No.
Sam's name is probably less familiar than the other ones, but Sam is one of these amazing forces behind the scenes. He's a songwriter. And if you were to, put him in, look him up on Google, Sam Hollander, Hollander, you'll say, oh my God, I know that song. I know that song. I know that song. He's written for everyone from Panic at the Disco to Weezer to, just every art. You'll recognize a number of #1 hits that Sam has written.
Wow.
And so he's kind of the glue. He's sort of the band leader, if you will, and putting together this group of artists, all of whom care very deeply about their Jewish heritage, but they don't make Jewish music per se. And that's kind of the vibe we wanted to go with for A Contract with God. And so
we might say more klezmer, less cowbell.
Bit of both, but yes, that's exactly right. We also don't want to, there'll be some klezmer in it. We'll have a little bit of, we want to have a little bit of nods to the authentic spirituality of it all. But yes, you're absolutely right. So
great.
And that one's being written literally as we speak. We have our next creative session on Friday. So that's also off to the races. So that's what's going on at theater. At film, we are making a film called The Lazy Susans, where we are fictionalizing the true story of 5 suburban moms who started a rock band over the pandemic.
Yep.
They all had little to no experience playing instruments. They had husbands in bands and kids who were in musical theater shows and in band practices. And they used to joke around. I mean, this is the true story. They used to joke around about, we should start our own band. And then over the pandemic, when it was a mixture of having some more time and also feeling like life's too short, they decided to do it. And they started a band. It's called The Lazy Susans.
That's great.
And they learned how to play. They turned out to be really great. They started selling out local shows in the Boston area. And Kelly Clarkson found them and flew them out to LA, and they played on the Kelly Clarkson show. And so we're taking that sort of stem of a story and fictionalizing it and turning that into a film. And we actually have an A-list actor whose name I can't divulge because we haven't announced her yet, but we have someone who's signed on to an ensemble story, but there is a lead, and so she'll play the lead. And we are talking now that you may know that there was a writer's strike in Hollywood for most of the year. And so now that strike is over, we're out to writers, and I think we've found our writer. We'll know in a few weeks, and is also very much off to the races with development. And those are the ones that are probably the furthest along. But we are also working on a Luther Vandross project that we're really excited about. We're working on a B-52s project that we're really excited about.
Golly.
So, we have a lot going on.
Speaking back to graphic novels, have you ever heard of or seen one called Ethel and Ernest? It is about a
But I don't know that one.
During World War II, and it was made into a film. And they wanted to use the one and only song my dad, Jim McCartney, ever wrote in the 1920s that Paul and Linda recorded as an instrumental. It's called Walking in the Park with Eloise. And they got in touch with MPL, and Paul was a big fan of this particular book, this graphic novel. And they had a meeting, and Paul showed up to the meeting and said, well, who's doing the end title track? I wouldn't mind doing that. So it's the only film in the world, it's called Ethel and Ernest, based on the graphic novel, that has a Jim McCartney and a Paul McCartney song in it.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I'd like to tell you more about it.
We went to the premiere at the Palm Springs Film Festival a few years ago now. And I wore my dad's overcoat, and I still have the ticket in the pocket, should he come back. And there's a little tiny Easter egg in the film where Ethel and Ernest are going on a date for they've saved up sixpence, and they're going to a dance. And as they walk into the dance hall, the poster beside in the portico says, "Tonight, Jim Mack's band," my dad's band.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's really cool. Check it out, Ethel and Ernest. I think you'll dig it, being from a graphic novel.
I didn't know that your dad was a songwriter as well.
He had a band, big jazz band.
He had a band, but I didn't know that he.
Yeah, he played around, and this song is called Walking in the Park with Eloise, and it was released under the name The Country Hams. It was Chet Atkins, Floyd Kramer, Paul and Linda in 1972, I think it would be, 72, 73, something.
Do you have a record of any of his other songs?
No, he just would tinker around. He never really wrote them down. He didn't read music, like Paul didn't read music. So, it's
amazing.
Yeah, just kind of unfortunately lost to time, but it's one of those things. So as you may or may not know, you probably don't know, our very special guest, Angie, has a book out called Mrs. McCartney's Liverpool Limericks and Other Random Irish Haikus, which is zooming up the charts on Amazon. And so we put together a special little thank you limerick for you spending time with us today.
Oh my gosh.
People scrolling across the bottom, you can learn more at tiwaryent.com about this fantastic young man that we've had the pleasure to steal so much time from today. So we'll make it quick.
Oh, it's my pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Oh,
my goodness.
Very welcome.
And when you get your new projects out and running, we'd love to do it again anytime. It'd be fantastic.
Thank you. You be careful what you offer.
Oh, yeah. No, we're down.
Yeah.
As you can tell, I love to talk. So I'll come back and talk about my projects anytime.
Great.
We'll keep you to that.
So here is your personal one-off, one and only in the universe limerick. You ready? 1, 2, 3. Vivek, with a passion so bright, wrote of Epstein, a man in the light. From the Beatles' first songs to Broadway's grand throngs, his stories bring hits to new heights.
That is so kind.
Here you go. We'll email that to you.
That is so kind. Thank you.
Put it straight through the shredder.
Did you write it out? Did you?
Yes.
Can you put it on? Will you write it by hand and send me a scan?
I will. I'm a better writer than her.
She's
grown up on computers.
I'm a big believer in the written word and the
joined ups, as we call them at school.
Absolutely.
Joined ups.
Unbelievably kind of you.
Oh, not at all. It's our pleasure. Yeah.
I have to break just 1 second before we go. So speaking of written letters, so this is Angie's book, The Liverpool Limericks.
Amazing. How cool.
She wrote to the Queen Camilla in England, who has the Queen's Reading Room library and collects books that can be read to, PG audiences, and said, would you like me to send you a book? And son of a gun, if we didn't get back a hand-signed letter from Queen Camilla.
That's awesome.
And saying she'd like to have a copy of the book.
Yep.
Which I have sent.
Congratulations.
Yeah, to Buckingham Palace, but of course, with the tremendous amount of mail that's going in there for the princess.
But the good news is it's print on demand. That next time I update the manuscript for Amazon, if with your permission to use your name, I'm going to put your limerick.
Oh my gosh, are you kidding?
Yes.
Okay. That will happen this week.
Okay.
Oh, that's such an honor. Thank you so much.
Pleasure.
You're so very welcome. Well, everybody go to tiwaryent.com, follow Vivek on socials, join his fan club, and join the fun. He's a young man doing great things for preserving and presenting music, and we couldn't love you more for it.
Oh, thank you so much. I love being here. What a joy to spend the afternoon with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, kids. We'll see you all of a sudden. Bye-bye.
Bye.